Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. The top headlines tonight. Well, as 59 of his MPs revolt, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, is forced to quit within 24 hours. Boris Johnson, who was defiant in Parliament yesterday, was left with no option as more MPs left him. Indian origin Rishi Sunak among top contenders to replace him. And the pound rises as Boris Johnson finally does a Brexit. Uddhav Thackeray is still to decide on presidential candidate support, says Shiv Sena MP Sawant. NDA versus the opposition candidate. Could Uddhav switch sides? Loyalist MP Arvind Sawant to NDTV that Mr. Thackeray will decide soon. But to avoid an MP's revolt like MLAs, will Thackeray back the NDA? Death threats for journalist Zubair. He filed an urgent plea in the Supreme Court. The top court is likely to urgently hear that plea tomorrow. Indian markets are up for the second day running by almost 1%. Also up are oil prices. The Brent crude is up 1% above $100 per barrel again. And an Aam Aadmi wedding for Punjab Chief Minister Bhawna Gawli as Mr. and Mrs. Mann get married. Chief Minister Kejriwal of Delhi and AAP MPs are Baratis. Well, our lead story tonight, a day after a defiant Boris Johnson said in Parliament that he would not quit as Prime Minister, today he was left with literally no choice. As 59 of his MPs more and more came forward to resign from his government, he came out on the steps of 10 Downing Street and said to his friends in politics that no one is indispensable. Radhika Iyer and Maha are covering that story because, of course, we may just have an Indian origin Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak, among one of the top contenders, and of course also an India connection that he is Infosys' Narayan Murthy's son-in-law. But let's just look at the dramatic developments that have finally brought down UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson just short of 3 years into his term.
And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. The process of choosing that new leader should begin now, and the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
The only surprise for many today is that Boris Johnson's fall as Prime Minister took as long as it did. It was his cover-up and claimed ignorance of a close political aide's sexual misconduct that finally did him in. 59 MPs quit Johnson's government in less than 48 hours, including the Chancellor or Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, who was among the first to go, saying the public rightly expect government to be conducted properly, competently and seriously. One of the last to tell him to go was Priti Patel, seen as a loyalist and a hardliner. Johnson says he will continue in power till his successor is appointed, for which a timetable will be announced next week. But the public perhaps cannot afford a long drawn-out succession battle. Inflation is at a 40-year high and many people are struggling with the cost of living crisis triggered by spiralling fuel prices.
Fed up with a Prime Minister who's presided over a culture of lies and law-breaking at the heart of government. Fed up with a Prime Minister who is utterly unfit for the great office that he holds.
Johnson's unruly blonde hair and bumbling persona were instantly recognizable even to those with no interest in politics. He was fired from his first journalism job for fabricating a quote in 1988. Despite controversies and scandals over the years, he powered into office in 2019 with a majority and ensured Brexit, Britain's painful exit from the European Union. It is estimated to have cost the GDP 2 to 2.5%.
We're going to get Brexit done.
His handling or mishandling of COVID was severely criticized, underplaying the threat. But it was Partygate which started eroding his popular support. The Prime Minister and his aides partied together repeatedly right through a strict lockdown he imposed on other citizens.
And I want to begin
He survived
today
a
by
confidence
renewing my
motion
apologies
just
to
last
the
month,
House,
despite
Speaker of the House,
41% of his
that I
MPs
take
voting
full
against him,
responsibility
only
for
to be
everything
stung by
that took
another
place
scandal.
on my-
Last week, it emerged that the Prime Minister had protected his close political aide, Chris Pincher, despite knowing about serious allegations of sexual misconduct. It was one scandal too many for Teflon Boris. But as he stepped down, he reminded Britain of his singular success. He had given the Conservative Party the biggest win in decades.
As I will until a new leader is in place. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time, thank you for that incredible mandate, the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979.
Can the Tories keep the voters he brought into the fold without the man described as a jovial buffoon but driven by ambition? An NDTV Bureau report.
Well, let's go across to Radhika Iyer in London, who's reporting that story. Radhika, so what's the mood there now that he's finally gone? Well, we've seen the newspapers, the headlines, all having a field day with this. But what's the reality on what the people currently feel now? The pound already going up. The fact is that the economic crisis is real regardless of who becomes Prime Minister now.
Yes, it has been recognized as an economic crisis, as a cost of living crisis here in the UK. And with Boris Johnson's announcement that he's going to be resigning, the pound value has increased by 0.8%, which is an indication that the industry, the finance sector is relieved. And so perhaps are the people, at least most of them, because there was a YouGov poll survey which was conducted and 78% voted for Boris Johnson to leave as the Prime Minister. I'm just meters away from 10 Downing Street. There've been a huge range of protests that was happening. When Boris was out making that statement, people were booing and having him go. I have with me somebody like David, who is a school teacher. He's an English teacher here in London. David, what are your thoughts at the moment? You're here in 10 Downing. You have your students here. Mm-hmm. We are in a crisis, clearly, of an economic crisis. And then we have this political crisis developing. Okay. And Boris has resigned, but he's not going just yet.
Sure.
What's your reaction?
Well, I'm happy to see him going, but I don't feel like there's going to be any positive change because he's going to be replaced by one of his colleagues. And we've seen from them people like Priti Patel who are packing people off and sending them to Rwanda. I don't feel like there's going to be much positive change. And I'm out here. I've got a mandate to teach so-called British values to my students who come from other parts of the world. I don't see those British values reflected in the government. The respect for the rule of law, democracy, respect for other people and their faiths and beliefs. I'm not seeing it, and I don't have any hope of seeing it.
Is there this sense of disappointment and frustration by every British voter that these values that we look for in a leader are nearly not existent anymore across the globe?
I can't speak for other British voters. A lot of people voted him in. I wasn't one of them. I would have chosen somebody like Jeremy Corbyn, who I feel represents the values that I don't think are necessarily British values, but values that we share globally these days, okay. Such as democracy, respect for the rule of law, equality, and such like. Yeah.
Okay. And would you have any names for who should be the next Prime Minister from the contender list we've seen? We have people like Rishi Sunak, we have Penny, we have Jeremy Hunt, Sajid.
Not one of them. I can't stand any of them.
Are you a Labour supporter by any chance?
I supported Labour briefly when we had Jeremy Corbyn, but no, I wouldn't support them anymore, no.
Not right now?
Not at all. There's no leadership there.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. That, of course, is one voter who doesn't believe either in the Conservative Party or in the Labour Party at the moment, and just sharing a sheer sense of frustration, Sonia. But we know that it's going to take about a week before we have a date for the new contenders to actually throw their hat into the race. They need to have at least a backing of 8 of their colleagues, who will then, through a secret ballot, be eliminated if they have lesser of a support. And it may take weeks before we have the new name of the new person who is likely to be the next Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, because they clearly hold the majority as yet.
No, and of course, I think what that voter perhaps expressing is also the frustration. He's talking about democratic values, but also we've seen all the strikes out there about the cost of living in Great Britain amid rising inflation. And Maha, just to go across to you for the Indian angle, because of course, in the last few months, one of the focus of the controversy has been the man we're talking about as a possible top contender, which is of course Rishi Sunak, which besides being of Indian origin, though he was born in Great Britain, he also has the India connection of being Infosys' Narayan Murthy's son-in-law.
Absolutely. And even though the person there who was speaking with Radhika Iyer dismissed him as a choice, but he is a serious contender as far as the top job in the party is concerned. He's had a meteoric rise in the party. In 2015, he became an MP. Within 3 years, he became a junior minister in a local government. And then he was not the first choice really for the Chancellor's position. Sajid Javed had that. But once he stepped down, Rishi Sunak took over that position. And during the period of the pandemic and the lockdown, Sonia, is when he garnered a lot of public support as well, because of the package that they had come out with to support people, to provide some relief and job retention as well, Sonia, a scheme that was made available to the people in UK who could not get jobs during the pandemic period. But recently there's been a bit of a controversy with regards to his wife. Again, India Connect there, Narayan Murthy's daughter. This is with regards to the non-domicile tax status. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But right now, because he was the second person to have quit from the cabinet, yes, it appears that he might be a very strong contender.
And of course, we look at the bookie odds, Radhika. I don't know if you've got the latest bookie odds, but we've seen it's between Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, but also that there may be a dark horse who may emerge as well.
Yes, that's true. It could well be a dark horse. It could well be somebody completely out of the blue, because the Conservative Party at this stage is very, very keen not just to have somebody who can deliver governance, but also somebody who is seen without baggage, who is seen without having a reputation, who is seen as someone who was not perhaps loyal to Boris Johnson or who is not a Brexiteer. Now, people like Rishi Sunak have known to be loyal to Boris Johnson in the past, although he set this trend for the exodus that we saw in the last 48 hours. So it's possible very much that the Conservative Party brings in absolute fresh blood to try and keep away from controversy, because clearly the next challenge for the Conservative Party is to make sure that there is no further division within the party during the time of selection of this new and the replacement to Boris Johnson, the new leader.
Well, I'm joined right now live from London by Lord Rami Ranger, who is a member of the House of Lords of the Conservative Party. Now, Lord Ranger, of course, we've all been watching in India. In fact, for once, UK politics is making Indian politics look boring. And it is the way Boris Johnson went, kicking and screaming after saying it was clear that he had lost moral support, at least within the Conservative Party yesterday. He stood in Parliament and said, I have the mandate of the people. Today, even there were reports that he would try to stay on till autumn. How much has the Conservative Party been damaged by this unseemly resignation drama? And do you think that you can actually revive? Can perhaps a Rishi Sunak or another popular face revive the Conservative Party at this point?
Sonia, you're absolutely right. The man was facing a dilemma because he won a record amount of parliament seats in the last election, and he felt that he was the man of the people and the people were with him, and he didn't want to let them down by just resigning until making a big fuss, which he did. But unfortunately, all his colleagues had enough of the sleaze which was surrounding his leadership, and they one scandal after the other, and that damaged the party's credibility. Any leader who's elected has to have two criteria. One, he can unite the party, he can unite the country, and secondly, he can revive the economy. The economy is number one to bring votes home. So therefore, I'm glad he is gone. He will now be replaced by someone who will be popular among all the members of parliament. End of the day, members of parliament have to convince the voters in their constituency to vote for the Conservative Party and to get them re-elected. But having said that, this could be very interesting for the Indian point of view.
Absolutely. I just want to ask you on that, because, you know, of course, the Conservative Party has faced a series of defeats in the recent parliamentary by-elections in their stronghold. So, in that sense, Labour looking much stronger. Can Rishi Sunak, you mentioned the Indian point of view now, he in the last, especially at a time when the average Briton is facing a huge inflation, cost of living crisis, can Great Britain's wealthiest minister, somebody who, of course, is the son-in-law of Infosys and Narayan Murthy, his wife, wealthy in her own right. Is he the right face right now for the Conservatives, do you think?
Well, he has been a very reliable chancellor, one of the best we had. He was very imaginatory. He offered a lot of support to businesses. He saved a lot of jobs. And on top of that, he found a lot of money for the NHS. With that, we could have the record vaccine rollout program, and that is people are enjoying freedom in Great Britain as a result. So he has been a very clever chancellor, and he's a very popular chancellor. He has no baggage attached to him, although there was a little controversy. They never broke any rule, because that rule was given for people to have a non-dom status, so that was legitimate. But as you know, the press will always find something to create sensation. And but people in Britain are very clever. They know that this is the man who has brought stability to economy.
I don't know if you can blame everything on the press, Lord Ranger, but just to say that...
I know I always believe the press underpins our democracy. We do need to have a very robust press, which you are, Sonia, one of the best in the business. So, but having said that, Rishi has got plan to cut taxes, because we are party for lower taxes and giving opportunity. You know, the biggest
I think that's the main point you're saying, to make living easier for the average Britain is where the people. But of course, India watching this very closely, because as you said, it's got a special interest for us. And wow, that would be something if you have an Indian origin person as Prime Minister of Great Britain. We've come full circle in a way since the days of
it is now a possibility.
Exactly. So it's now a possibility, much more than it's ever been before. So let's see if history is made in Great Britain there. We'll all be watching with great interest. Thank you, Lord Ranger, for joining me. But of course, from UK politics back to what's almost boring Indian politics today, and that's about the divide in the Shiv Sena, which has now become all about the lower rungs of the party as well. But what's happening now is that after the MLA split, where Eknath Shinde got a comprehensive majority of MLAs, what's going to happen with MPs now? So a very interesting thing said today by Sena MP Arvind Sawant, who's loyal to Mr. Thackeray. Saurabh, just be coming to that. Let's just listen to what Mr. Sawant said, because he said Uddhav Thackeray hasn't decided which way MPs will vote in the presidential election. Will Uddhav Thackeray vote with the NDA presidential candidate to save his party? Here's what Mr. Sawant said.
Which candidate will the Shiv Sena support? Will it be Draupadi Murmu or will it be Yashwant Sinha?
That will be decided by the Honorable Chief, Party Chief. He will decide it, and according to his advice we will vote. There is no question about it. The question is that it has to be, again, Chief Whip or the leader of the party. The Speaker cannot do like this. That again is a violation. Earlier, the Deputy Speaker, when there was no Speaker, granted the permission to our Chief Whip as well as the leader of the Assembly Legislative Party.
So, sort of an interesting twist there by Arvind Sawant, because of course earlier the Shiv Sena and Sanjay Raut was very much part of the opposition's plannings on a presidential candidate, and suddenly this twist to the tail. Why is that?
Well, yes, Sonia, you're absolutely right. The Shiv Sena was part of that meeting, also part of the deliberations where Yashwant Sinha's name was decided as the opposition candidate. But now, of course, things have changed in Maharashtra. The Shiv Sena, led by Uddhav Thackeray, is still very much in alliance with the Congress and the NCP, but majority of the Shiv Sena MLAs have broken away and are with the BJP, and they call themselves the Shiv Sena. So you have a situation where, in the absence of a whip, because remember, in these presidential elections, a whip is not necessary. What you might see is Uddhav Thackeray not making a decision really at this point, allowing MPs to vote according to their preferences. And we know one MP, Rahul Shivale, who's also an MP from Mumbai, has already written to Uddhav Thackeray saying the Shiv Sena should support the NDA presidential candidate, Draupadi Murmu, who's also likely to make history as the first tribal president, but also other MPs with Eknath Shinde. For example, Eknath Shinde's son, Shrikant Shinde, is likely to vote for Draupadi Murmu, who's the NDA candidate. So this is going to be a close sort of thing to watch, given the fact what's happening.
For the Shiv Sena, because, the battle for the assembly, the battle for government is over. Now it's a battle for the party. We saw that happen with corporators in Thane as well Mr. Shinde's home district.
That's right. Corporators have joined Mr. Shinde, but these are ex-corporators because the terms of all these municipal corporators have ended. Right now, there are administrators. But yes, given that almost 67 corporators have joined hands with Eknath Shinde, makes it fairly impossible for the Shiv Sena to win back the Thane Municipal Corporation, at least the Uddhav Thackeray-led Shiv Sena. What will happen in Mumbai is, of course, again, yet to be seen. But yes, this comes at a time where the party is imploding under Uddhav Thackeray, and this might be one more example of where party MLAs choose to, or MPs choose to vote the way they like.
Eknath Shinde moves to establish control. Thanks so much, Saurabh, for that update. A quick look at other news. Well, markets gained for the second straight day, up nearly 1%. The Sensex up by 427 points. The Nifty gaining 143 points. Metal, PSU and banking stocks have gained the most. Also, Brent crude prices are up globally 1%, above $100 per barrel again. Well, today in Punjab, the headlines weren't about politics, but about a wedding. The Punjab Chief Minister's wedding, which was in typical Aam Aadmi style. It was small, with AAP convener and Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal and other MPs as the baratis. Here it is, the marriage of 48-year-old Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann to 32-year-old Dr. Gurpreet Kaur.
A high-profile but low-key Punjabi wedding. An Aam Aadmi wedding, if you will. Punjab's Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann married Dr. Gurpreet Kaur from Haryana. In attendance, only family and close friends, including the Delhi Chief Minister and other Aam Aadmi Party colleagues.
मैं भगवान से प्रार्थना करता हूं कि उनको बहुत ही सुखी वैवाहिक जीवन दे और दोनों बहुत खुश रहें.
Dr. Gurpreet Kaur has a long association with not just the Mann family but also the Aam Aadmi Party. She campaigned for Raghav Chaddha, and now Chaddha, a member of the Parliament's House of Elders, says there's pressure on him to get married.
Yes, all ceremonies happen, whether it's the Juta ceremony. It's an emotional moment for me as well to see him so happy, and he has a big reason to celebrate today. And absolutely. I must say the happiest person today is not Mann Sahab, it is Mann Sahab's mother.
It was a simple wedding, but sure one filled with laughter, happiness and great food. The wives and families of previous Punjab Chief Ministers have been very politically active. So it remains to be seen whether this personal knot will develop into a political partnership very soon. In Chandigarh with Mohammed Ghazali and camera person Ashok Mohale, Priyanshi Sharma for NDTV.